This is, as you probably know by now, GGU Presents. And this is our Back to the Basics series, where I get to talk to really interesting people about interesting stuff that they're doing. So, and once again, we're doing that. My name is Marc Singer. I'm Dean of the School of Undergraduate Studies at Golden Gate University. And I am thrilled to have here today Amy Kweskin. And I'm going to tell you, she's with Artsightful. She's with Intersection for the Arts. I couldn't figure out how to edit her bio. There's just so many interesting things here. So just bear with me while I tell you all about the stuff that Amy's been doing. So Amy, as I mentioned, is the Principal of Artsightful, through which she shares insights into the business of art. She specializes, I really like this phrase, so I couldn't edit it myself, in developing inspiring and accomplishable strategic plans with artists and arts organizations. I know Amy because she's an adjunct instructor, faculty member here at Golden Gate University, but she also has worked with St. Mary's College, and previously is a full-time faculty member at the Art Institute of California in San Francisco. She's a co-author or contributing author, you can tell me which one you like better, of the Center for Cultural Innovation's publication, Business of Art, An Artist's Guide to Profitable Self-Employment, which is now in its 3rd edition, right? So that's going pretty well. Additionally, I'm only like halfway through. There's so much stuff going on here. Amy's the Director of Professional Development at Intersection for the Arts, where she creates training programs in the business of art. And she's not only an instructor at Golden Gate University, she's also pursuing a doctorate in business administration, a DBA at Golden Gate. So she's one of our students. And her focus there is to develop sustainable arts businesses and vibrant arts ecosystems. She also got her master's in arts administration from GGU. She's got degrees in cinematography and English from Ithaca College. But wait, there's more. To bring balance into her life work, Amy is also a certified yoga instructor. I can't believe she's found the hour to talk with us here. Amy, welcome. So glad to have you here today.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, and I should also mention, because this just came up a little while ago, if you've been in San Francisco and you've seen in the past that Hearts in San Francisco project, you know, where the big giant hearts were all over the city, like in Union Square, and that was Amy's project. She put that together. She was the project manager for that, right? So that's, and some of those are still around, like 10 years later, right? They're here. So I know folks are going to have a lot of questions. You know, they want to join in on the conversation. Please put those in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen there, as opposed to the chat. But you're welcome to chat with folks here too, if you like. All right. So Amy, why don't I just jump right in somewhere, and because there's a lot to talk about. How did you get involved with the arts? Like, how far back does your connection to the arts go?
Gosh, my connection to the arts goes way back. I mean, I come from an artistic family, artistic grandmothers, but formally my training was, as you mentioned, in cinema and photography at Ithaca College in upstate New York. And that was pre-digital. Like, I literally went into the darkroom and, you know, processed my film and my images. So that's my background. And when I graduated, I hadn't learned a stitch of business. And so I went to look for a job, and a photographer asked me what my day rate was. How much do I charge per day? And I was like, what's a day rate? And I realized I had graduated with a bachelor's degree and not one bit of knowledge about the business side of the arts. So that became my personal mission, is understanding and teaching the business of art. So.
Oh, all right. That's a good straightforward story, and it's certainly needed, right? A lot of artists, as you're saying, don't really know how that side of their lives works, or could be made more effective, I suppose. So
yeah, artists sometimes feel like if they delve too far into the business, they'll lose their creative edge, right? So I always use the example of, if you ask an artist if they have a business card, they're like, here, let me rip up this brown paper bag and write my number on it. You say, oh, what if you had something formal? But then I've lost my creative edge. So
yeah,
help them get past that.
No, that's great. I know in our society, a lot of folks have tended to think of business as sort of opposed to art, right? So you're either in commerce and business, or you're an artist, and you can't be both. But that's not what you tell people, I would think. Right?
I tell them that their inner artist is latent, and their inner business person is latent. That I'm going to help wake it up.
That's great. So I wanted to talk to you about the work you're doing now, but I'm also interested in some of the work you have done before. So, well, you've started to answer part of the question I had sort of set up for you. So, as I mentioned, you're an instructor here, and you're a doctoral student here. And Golden Gate now seems to focus much more on that business side of what we're talking about: business, technology, and law. What How do you see these pieces really connecting? I think, as you mentioned, you need to know both. But what's how does this work for you to be at a school like in a DBA program as somebody who's a great supporter and proponent of the arts?
I love it. My classmates, my cohort, they know me as the arts person, and actually a lot of them enjoy the arts as well. But what's nice is that I'm dealing with collaborating with people that have MBAs and highly accomplished in the business world. And then I bring in some arts and culture, but they also, I mean, a rising tide raises all ships. We keep building on our knowledge. And sometimes I even find myself looking at topics that are not arts related. So I'm like, in fact, well, when I taught at the Art Institute of California, San Francisco, I taught in the fashion marketing and management and culinary arts departments, which my master's from Golden Gate University in Arts Administration prepared me for those teaching positions because it's sort of like a modified MBA. So I'm expert at the creative side of business or helping creative people with business. So just a class we just started this week, I looked at an article about fashion. I thought, oh, I could do some fashion research. I'm like, no, stay the course, stay the course.
Wait, so that's kind of neat. So what you said before about like you telling artists that there's a latent business person inside them. It sounds like you're also telling folks who are focused on business that there's a latent artist inside them.
Yeah. Well, when I graduated from Golden Gate, one of the first jobs I got was work, and for a long time I stayed there. I worked at the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. I worked for an organization that's now defunct called the Arts and Business Council, and I ran a program called Business Volunteers for the Arts, where I placed business professionals as pro bono management consultants with arts organizations. And so it was exciting to work with members of the chamber, both staff at the chamber, but also business members, and help them become management consultants, volunteer pro bono management consultants. But I would say I was wearing two hats. I would talk my business hat to my arts folks, and my arts hat to my business folks, but I'm really good at bringing them together. So it allowed me to do a lot of interesting work around sponsorships. And so I'm not shy about either. So I'm interested in that, that intersection.
It's rare that somebody's able to sort of speak both languages, if you will, and sort of make each understandable to the other, as you're describing. So that's great to have that talent, You mentioned when you were a student here before, so you got a master's in arts administration, which we don't offer anymore at Golden Gate. So I don't know if I'm sending a message to somebody who's listening, to reconsider that. But can you talk about what that program was about, or you've told me a little bit previously about how that program, I guess, came to be, or what function it served. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that program was really helping current arts managers and aspiring arts managers to learn the business side. So it was like a modified MBA. And that's where I really learned about the arts ecosystem in San Francisco. It was like an accelerator for me. So the way you get jobs in the arts in San Francisco, I tell people when they're trying to do that, is all about networking. It's hardly ever putting in an application, in my experience. It's about the people that you know. And this program had the movers and shakers, and we all looked out for each other. Now we're sort of spread across the earth like dust in the wind. But it was really exciting to be in classes with people that were running theater companies and dance companies and museums and civic arts agencies and just their own arts ventures. It was a wonderful program. And we did take classes with the general MBA students. Some of the same professors or faculty would cross over, and that was exciting as well. But it was run by Dr. Ann Smith, who is my mentor, ran that program for a long time. And we had a publication that was put out. I can't remember the frequency, but it was called Bravo. And it was written by the students and alumni, and I was the desktop publisher in the days of PageMaker.
When we called it that,
I would
right?
put it out. But it was like we made an impression. There are not that many arts administration programs around the country or the world, and we were one of them. And Anne used to be, get us out there. And so we hosted international conferences at GGU related to arts management. It was a really good program, but unfortunately, the school cut it. So it was,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know why.
No, that's true. No, I think if I understood right, maybe you told me this, so tell me if that's not true. That there was sort of a wave of schools around the country launching programs like that because they were starting to get caught up in thinking about the thing that you're now focused on, right?
Yeah.
The role of the arts in the community and that sort of thing. So San Francisco was not alone in having a program like that, I think.
Right. Oh no, I can't remember how many there were or are right now around the country, but yeah, we were thought leaders, and it's kind of like public administration. Doing a master's of public administration, it's a master's in arts administration. So it was forward thinking, and what I found was when I went out into the field after I graduated from GGU with that degree, people either didn't know what it was and they couldn't figure me out, or they was like, "Wow, interesting," because the history of the arts is that usually the arts managers emerged from the artists themselves. So like, for instance, the San Francisco Mime Troupe is a collective. And so it's a great example of people being passionate about the art and then saying, oh, somebody should do the marketing. Somebody else should manage the venue or the place that we're going to perform. Oh, somebody else should work on getting donations. And people emerged into these leadership, or I should say business roles, not, I would say business leadership as opposed to the artistic leadership. So they're wearing two hats. And that was sustainable in the 60s and no longer sustainable now, not easily sustainable. But what was interesting was I kind of like inserted myself with this degree. I didn't work my way, I didn't pay my dues. So that was a lot of the attitude that I got from people when I went out into the field. They're like, you have a master's in this program? Huh? So it was interesting. And then I had very high expectations for what professionalism meant in the arts. And so there was a clash for sure, because people are like, no, you're paying your dues and I know what I'm doing. And you're some hot thing coming out of graduate school. And I was like, I just want to do my best. So it was an interesting learning curve. It was kind of like a collision course. And now I got past that, but I definitely.
No, that's interesting. That the arts are not the only place where I've seen it. I mean, education certainly has that as well. There's a lot more professionalization of certain administrative roles, for instance, but so there are these two tracks, right? Where there are some people who have majored in it, and then there are other people who have sort of worked their way up through the system. And so I think you see that in the arts just as much as you see it here. Yeah.
Definitely do. Yeah.
So I wonder what you think of the lasting impact of a program like that. It seems like you mentioned they're scattered to that song's going to be in my head now that you said Dust in the Wind.
I just heard it today.
Yeah, so now it's here. But you mentioned that. Do you see those folks as having played a role in sustaining and sort of or supporting arts in our community?
I was before we started talking today, I went to look on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, who are my friends that graduated from that program? And I was like, gosh, we are like dust in the wind. So I can only identify a couple of folks really fast. So like, for instance, my classmate, Kristen Zarimba, who is the public art coordinator at the city of Oakland in the cultural affairs department. And she's been in that position for a long time. And so when I see Kristen, we have this deep, long, historic connection, even though we haven't interacted in years, but when we see each other, it's like family, because we're part of a cohort. The same with my friend and colleague Nancy Hightone Leb, who is the director of advancement at Public Media Group of Southern California. So she started up here. She actually started as a business volunteer. She liked she in that program, Business Volunteers for the Arts. She was interested in getting to the arts. She heard how much I love the GGU program. She went and she did it herself, even though she had already had a career in public relations. And then she started her next career in arts administration and now has moved down to Southern California and continues as a leader down there. So it's like, I don't know, we're a pretty special group of folks. And in that era of Golden Gate, there were a lot of students from Asia. And so we had a lot of Asian colleagues as well that were international students. And that was super exciting. And Ann Smith actually went over to China, I believe it was China, and she taught arts administration there for a while as well. So it just felt like we had a common vocabulary, common experiences, and an understanding of each other.
Ah, that's really nice. And then it's always great when you can promote that sort of thing at an institution like ours as well.
Yeah.
We're starting to get a couple of questions in the Q&A, so we'll get to those a little bit later. But if other folks have questions, by all means, please post them there. So your experience in the how did your experience in this program, or in those experiences you had before this program, the master's program, lead you to the work you do now with Artsightful? Maybe you could even just talk about what Artsightful does. That might be helpful.
It's my consulting practice. So actually it came out of, so as I said, I went from GGU, I had a few small jobs until I ended up at the Chamber of Commerce. And when I ran that Business Volunteers for the Arts program, I would interview the arts organization administrators that were looking to obtain a consultant. And because I interviewed hundreds of these people, I started to understand. I saw some common themes, and actually I used my photography. With photography, I learned to see the outer edges of an image and then notice the details within that image. And that's how I look at arts administration, or at least consulting, is that I start out with a sketch of what I learn about the client, and then I start to fill in the details until I have an image and I can see, I mean, it sounds really unusual, but I can see what's out of focus and what needs clarification. And so I'm also really good at just navigating difficult situations and people that have maybe difficult sometimes personalities. So in the arts, we get some strong characters. Anyway, so what I ended up doing was really enjoying that work. And so the way I got into consulting, ironically, was through the Hearts in San Francisco project that I mentioned earlier. So the Chamber of Commerce, when I left, I was known to be a go-to person. And so the San Francisco Arts Commission was contacted about this Hearts in San Francisco project. And they said, who can manage it? And the director of the Arts Commission said, oh, talk to Amy Kweskin. She's available. And that's how I got into that. And then I started getting more and more gigs that way. So
wow. I know you have one of those handy. Yeah, would you show us? Yeah, please.
I can show you. Okay, so the Hearts in San Francisco, we published a book. This is the book cover. They're out of print, but so the most famous heart, I think, is Tony Bennett's heart. That's in Union Square.
Oh yes,
and
it's really nice.
I have so many stories about Hearts in San Francisco. So my job was to coordinate the artists. And so this is kind of based on Ponies on Parade that's around the country. So my job, this was founded by two philanthropists. I have their photo here, Nancy Bechtel and Ellen Newsom. That's wrong. Newman. That's Gavin
Newman, because Newsom is the governor guy, right?
This guy here, when he was mayor. So Ellen Newman, her father was Cyril Magnin of the retail stores. And so these two women had a vision of, it was right after 9/11, and they said, we need people to come back to San Francisco and we want to see people in Union Square. So they thought of this Hearts in San Francisco, and it benefited the San Francisco General Hospital Foundation. And so my job was these two ladies would identify the artists that they wanted to do hearts. And these were massive hearts that would fit this whole space behind me. And so my job was to contact the artists and say, would you like to put your art on a heart? And of course they would say, what are you talking about? And so my job was then to get the heart delivered to their studio, wherever it was. And so Tony Bennett's studio was in Manhattan in a penthouse. So we flew that heart out to Manhattan, and it went up into his penthouse, and he painted it. And I have one sort of gossipy story. So this heart in the center, the sunset. Okay, I'm going to reveal it.
Oh, let's hear it. Yeah, that's why we're here.
So my job was also to explain to the artists how to make sure that their art was preserved by putting a varnish on the heart. But Tony Bennett's heart was not varnished when it came back, when it flew back. And so we couldn't put it outdoors. So we hired another artist who went and painted the varnish on his heart, and the varnish ate away this heart. And so when Tony Bennett, we brought him out to San Francisco. I don't think I have a photo of that, but he came and he sang on Union Square at that event where you saw these three folks here. He was there as well. And when he saw the heart, he leaned over to me and he's like, my heart is damaged. What happened to the paint in the center? I'm like, oh no, sir, that's how it arrived. So, yeah, so it looks sort of like kind of a cool fading heart, but it's a mistake. Anyway, that heart is still out there. There are other hearts. I just will take a moment and show you. This is the one that is by the artist Hung Lu. And Hung Lu's heart, this one was sold, we sold all the hearts either on eBay or at a live auction at the baseball stadium. And this heart is owned by Diane Feinstein. It's in her yard, or it was at the time. So you'll notice that this heart has drippy spots, and that is actually the artist's work. It's how, so Hung Lu is a super interesting artist. I got to go to her studio and she showed me the heart when she was producing it. And if you go to the Oakland airport and you see there's glass windows, they have her birds on them. So people would be calling me, these hearts were all around the city of San Francisco, and they would call me up and they'd say, somebody's graffitied the art. And actually, no, it was supposed to be like that. So
oh, that's great.
I'll show you just one or two others.
Yeah,
so
please.
This one great. Features Kamala Harris when she was the district attorney of San Francisco. It doesn't look anything like her, but it's the artist's interpretation. And then here's my favorite heart. This is called the Entangled Heart, and it was covered in metal piping. And this one was on Union Square. Near the Ferry Building. And this heart was just so emotional because it's just wrapped up and kind of bound up.
Wow.
So,
wow. Oh, that's great. That's really great. And some of those are still around. Like I think you mentioned Wells Fargo has a couple of them still up, so you can still see them here and there.
If you go to the Wells Fargo's, like the Cornet one on Market at Montgomery, in their lobby, they have one. I think it has the eyes on it, and so there's a bunch of hearts still around. And every year since that project, they do 2 new hearts. So if you ever go to Union Square, you'll see hearts in there.
Oh, it's perfect. There's so many metaphors implied in all the things you just said. I'm not even going to try to take them apart, but it was great. Like my heart is damaged. It was so sad. All right. So there's a good question. I think. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Amy.
Well, no, I was just going to say I see questions in the.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple of them are on similar themes. So let me just ask one. Can you speak to the role of acting as a business advisor or agent for artists? And the person who wrote this is an attorney from GGU and often provides legal advice to artists. So can you talk about that? Is that part of your role, or do you see a need for that, especially?
Artists always want me to be an agent for them. I'm not an agent. It's a very specialized role. It's hard because I don't specialize in representing artists out into the world. I help them build their business acumen, their business plans. I use something called the business model canvas from the book Business Model Generation, which I highly recommend. I don't represent artists, and this is a place that there's opportunity to represent artists and to do that work. When it comes to legal aspects of arts, there's an organization called California Lawyers for the Arts, and they provide pro bono legal assistance and also present workshops. I contract them to present workshops at Intersection for the Arts for artists, the legal aspects. But mostly the concern is around contracts, I would say, and copyright is what I've seen most concerns about. And when I was at GGU, I took classes in that. We had the legal aspects of arts administration course, which gave me a good foundation, but there's obviously a lot, especially with the internet and digital media, or just the ability to digitize somebody's art. And right now that's hot, right? NFTs. So
it is, yeah.
It's hot.
Oh, I wasn't going to ask you about NFTs, but since you mentioned them, somebody's going to ask about it. So we can hold off. I'll give you a minute to compose.
No, I don't. It's funny because the paper I'm going to be writing for my course, my Doctor of Business Administration course, is on NFTs. So I haven't studied it yet. So.
Okay, so we'll have you back next week, maybe, and talk about that.
Like 8 weeks.
Okay. All right. So a similar question is also there's a kind of legal representation, but then there's also someone else asks about artists needing assistance in museum placements, for instance, or connecting with those folks. That's a different kind of a representation, I suppose, as well.
I mean, obviously it's essential. It's, I guess I would call it supply chain, which is this what I'm studying right now, right? So it's supply chain,
Yeah.
the interconnectedness or the channels. But that's not my area of expertise. There are other schools and programs that, you know, it's more curatorial, I would call it, and museum, but it's not what I specialize in. I'm not networked that way. I can give
I
people
see.
recommendations, but I don't represent artists. I help them understand business. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Well, you mentioned use the word ecosystem before, and there has to be, right, a whole group of folks, you know, working on the various pieces of it. There are the folks who work on the side. Well, you know, I think I mentioned to you, we spoke not long ago with Ron Gleit from the Contemporary Jewish Museum, and we thought, you know, we talked about how it looks from the museum side of things. So it's there's all kinds of roles that people can play in the arts, of course,
Yeah.
with the artist at the center, presumably. But
I like that.
yeah.
Sorry, artists, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We forgot about that. We should have mentioned one of them. Yeah. So you also work, though, besides your work with Artsightful, and we put the link in the chat here if folks want to check that out.
Yeah.
We did. Yeah. So you also work with Intersection for the Arts, which has a very different role, also in line with what we're discussing here. But can you talk about what Intersection does and how that works?
Yeah. Intersection for the Arts, fantastic organization. So we are one of the major, I would say, influencers in the arts ecosystem in San Francisco Bay Area. We provide all the resources, business resources artists need, I think, to thrive. And that begins with fiscal sponsorship. And so fiscal sponsorship, I will explain quickly fiscal sponsorship. So the idea of fiscal sponsorship is that an individual can't receive contributions that are tax deductible, but nonprofits can. So fiscal sponsor is an umbrella, and Intersection for the Arts is one of those umbrellas. And any contributions that come in on behalf of the fiscally sponsored projects, which are artists or collections of artists, that money is then say like rains down onto those artists, but the contributor is able to get a tax deduction because it's coming through a 501c3, which is the IRS the IRS code for arts and education and religious nonprofits, 501c3.
Oh, yeah.
That 3 is the indicator. And so Intersection's business model is that we provide the back end services to help manage those finances. So we receive a percentage of the money that comes in for each of those contributions. So this is tremendous. It's not allowed in every state. California does allow it. And there are other fiscal sponsors in the Bay Area. There's Theater, Theater Bay Area is considering being a fiscal sponsor, but they aren't one yet. There's Dancers Group as a fiscal sponsor, for instance, and so they focus on dancers. And so we have 146, I believe that's the current number, it might be a little more or less, fiscally sponsored projects. And then we also offer professional development training, which is what I'm responsible for, the programs. We have an accelerator program that is a cohort learning experience, and it's focused quite a bit around the business model canvas, business model generation book. And then we also provide co-working space. So it's now open again. And our co-working space is literally located at the intersection of Van Ness and Market Streets. So we have a space there that's just beautiful where we cohabitate with different organizations. It sounds like we're hamsters in a little cohabitation.
So, your habit trail, right?
Our little arts trail. So Intersection's been around for over 50 years. We started out, we've moved all over the city, started out in North Beach, and it was actually founded by conscientious objectors to the war, Vietnam War, and who did their community service by founding a service organization for artists. And in the past, the organization has had curatorial components to it where we presented art, but now we do a little bit of that. We're much more focused, though, on the business services.
Oh, I see. Well, we had not long ago, Janice Evans-Page, who's the CEO of Tides, on this show not long ago. And they do something similar, but for social entrepreneurs and other sort of activist groups and things. And it's something I'm just becoming aware is how important the role is that organizations like Intersection and Tides play in keeping these folks going and then allowing them to do the work they do. So that's great to hear. So you're coming at this from an angle that's a little different from what most folks would ordinarily think of when they think of the arts. So I'm just wondering, do you see from whether it's the business angle or some other angle? I often read things in the paper about how the arts community in the Bay Area is at risk. It's shrinking, it's disappearing, something like that. It's too expensive. Um, do you see it that way? Do you see the Bay Area arts community as being at risk in some way?
It's an ecosystem and it needs resources to survive, thrive. It's hard for artists. It's hard
Mm,
to live in San Francisco in particular, right? So it's very expensive. Um, there'll always be art, of course, but they say, when there's an area that is that artists come into an area, they bring vibrancy to it. And then what happens is it becomes very desirable, and then people move in, and the real estate gets very expensive, and then artists have to move out. So artists move to the East Bay, and now the East Bay, Oakland, Berkeley, very expensive. So artists are moving further and further away. Last year, I was involved in a project where people are asking if you're an artist if you're an Oakland artist because your art is based on Oakland and a culture of Oakland, but you can't live in Oakland, are you still an Oakland artist? And so what's happening is the artists are moving further out, Vallejo and then Sacramento, and they're just moving further out and finding community and bringing their vibrancy to those communities. But what's happened is, it's hard for your it's hard to get to sustain arts jobs in San Francisco when people have to commute so far to come into the city. I worked with an organization doing strategic plan, Community Music Center in the Mission, one of the oldest San Francisco arts organizations. And we did a study amongst the music faculty, and they were commuting from so far away that it wasn't even worth the time to come in. I mean, it was worth it because they want to teach music, but to commute into the city to teach and then commute back home took all their time and money, that it was a wash. So it's difficult.
oh man, this is not unique to the Bay Area too. I know people moving to Detroit and Cleveland, and they're just looking for affordable space and eventually a community forms, but
Mhm.
it's pushing people farther and farther away from the places where that real creativity was happening, as you're describing. Um, so wait, so can you be a Oakland artist if you don't live in Oakland?
Gosh, it's a hot topic. It's um, can you be a San Francisco arts administrator if you don't live in San Francisco? So
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
this is it's a difficult time. Actually, the best thing that's come out of this particular time period with COVID is Zoom, in that I'm running these programs for intersection for the arts, and we've had participants from as far away as Israel and as a lot of folks from Arizona and across California and Manhattan. And it's been fantastic that the geography really doesn't matter so much, in that we're able to all connect on Zoom. And same with at Golden Gate, my students are all over the
Yes.
country and the world when they Zoom into class. And so it's very important, to try to create a sense of community in that form.
It's true. Yeah, that's really, I know for us at Golden Gate, generally it's challenged. Well, for me, certainly, the question of what is community, and the arts are such an important part of sustaining community. But if people are as far flung as you're describing, I don't know if that's a breakdown of community or a new community, or have you thought about that?
I don't think it's a breakdown at all. Actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, I started offering coaching sessions for artists. We call them coaching circles. And so they were, I think it was $5 for an hour. And so that's where every week we would come together. It was a lot of the same faces would show up each week, and some new folks would come in. And it was very interesting because it started out with a lot of grieving. So artists were like grieving the loss of the ability to be with their audience, especially performing artists, right? So there was a lot of grieving. Then we went through all the stages of grief to the newest stage that's been discussed about grief, which is meaning making. So people were starting to make meaning of this and actually creating new art out of that, coming through the grieving cycle. And by the end, when this cohort, this unintentional cohort of artists, when we got through about 6 months of coaching, they were so empowered. And when somebody new would come in that hadn't been in the group, they were still at that early stage of grieving. And it was interesting to see the contrast, because they were like, I've lost my audience, I've lost my place, so I've lost my forum, and folks are like, hey, we're here for each other. So there's been some wonderful community building virtually that's been really helpful.
That's great. That's great. So I want to encourage folks, if you have questions for Amy Kweskin, please post them in the chat. And I'm not in the chat, I'm sorry, in the Q&A. And someone just asked in the chat if you have Artists Way groups. I don't know.
Artist Way is a book, and that would be so great to have the Artist Way group. Let's do it. I love stuff like that.
Really...
And then I also see Walt Stevenson, who's good friends with Ann Smith, my mentor, has put in a question about Jedi.
I was just totally getting to him. So justice.
I don't know what that is.
Oh yeah. So it's
Jedi Knights. That's all I know.
It should be, right? No, it's our internal way of talking about it. It's diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. Not in that order. Okay. But that it is a good question, and I was totally just about to read Walt's question to you, which was, yeah, where do you see the role of that being? Especially when we're talking about community, right? It's definitely got to be a part of it. Do you have thoughts about that?
I'm not an expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It certainly comes up in all the strategic planning consultancies that I do, and my work at Intersection for the Arts. It's very important. Area of interest, concern, and priority that is deeply impacting the operations of many arts organizations. I would say the arts are fully immersed in this question, or becoming, and there have been arts administrators who've been in positions for a long time who've stepped aside and said, you know, my turn, I've had my turn, make space for other people to have voice, visibility, agency. It's an area that needs a lot more work and many more leaders taking responsibility for that. And I think it's if it happens in the arts, we can be creative about that exploration. I read a fantastic book, Emergent Strategies. Ooh, I hope that's the right name. I'll pull it out in a second. But so thinking about this, but it's just something that I too am understanding biases and implicit and explicit biases, and not even knowing that your bias exists. And in fact, I just became a panelist for the California Arts Council for their one of their grant programs, and we did a whole training last week on implicit bias, and it's painful and important. So I think it's very important work.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things, again, we've talked about here is that this may not be an area of focus for you, but there's certainly there's a long-standing question of equity, gender equity within the arts that you know, folks are in the ways you're describing starting to address now, but that's been an issue for many years going back.
I feel like the Bay Area is so fantastic because I really believe, and maybe I'm being naive, but in my experience of what I've seen, artists can be themselves. Like you can, especially San Francisco, you can be your truest, loudest, most outrageous, most fantastic, most marvelous, sparkly self and thrive. Hopefully in your arts practice, there's acceptance, and that's maybe the positive end of the spectrum. The other end is like finding your voice and actually finding a forum, and even the ability to be visible is questioned. And when I lived in Oakland, it was a very big concern and topic and priority for Oakland artists in particular, that is just beginning to be addressed, but has miles to go.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, there's a question here, but I think you mentioned this at the very beginning. When you talk about artists, I mean, we think it often conjures of visual artists, painters and sculptors, but you also have worked with dancers, I believe.
A lot of dancers. I worked with a lot of dancers. I work with dancers now. I'm going to plug a different school. So I teach at St. Mary's in Orinda. I teach virtually. And they have a program called LEAP, L-E-A-P, Leading Education for Arts Professionals. And that program is unique in this country in that it provides course credit for professional dancers to pursue their bachelor's degrees. And that's because when you're a professional dancer, ballet or otherwise, you don't necessarily have time to go to college. Your body, your tool, your instrument only has a certain lifespan of elasticity and athleticism. And so your prime years are the years that you would be in school, and people have chosen, of course, to pursue the arts instead, dancing instead. And so what I do is I create custom one-on-one courses for these students. I just worked with a Broadway dancer, several professional ballerinas. I've been doing that for about 10 years, and it's so fun. So fun and with Zoom, I used to just talk to them on the phone. I didn't know what they looked like, but with the Zoom era, I can actually see them now, which is really exciting. And so I help them develop business plans and career next steps, and I teach them grant writing and leadership development, and I've worked with all kinds of interesting folks that aren't just in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, but also 50s and 60s and 70s. So
Wow.
going back to school. So.
That's neat. So when you talk about it that way, it really, on the one hand, you could say, oh, this is an arts community that involves dancers and painters and writers and poets, but really each of those groups will have very specific sort of challenges, specific needs, right? I imagine writers are probably a whole other question.
Yeah, you're right. Because there's years of specialized training. I mean, dance is the most obvious. Your body, you are an athlete, right? And so, and if you've ever seen the feet of ballet dancers, I mean, they look so beautiful and elegant, and then you look at their toes and you realize, wow, their feet have been battled into that, to be able to present that grace and beauty on the rest of the body, right? So there's commitment, and I actually compare ballet dancers to some of my military students, which is a super interesting correlation, because discipline, perseverance, focus. In fact, I had a ballet student who said her brother was in the military, and they would often talk about how their training was quite similar to be a professional dancer, in that discipline and commitment and endless practicing for excellence. So interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. That's a great connection to make. That's interesting. Huh. So there's another question here from the same person, Walt. It's the second part of his question, which I think I understand. So we talk about, and we've talked about here, this idea of how the arts can really help to shape or be the glue for a community, however you're defining that. But one of the things that I know comes up in our classes here at GGU is the question of cohesiveness within an organization. Do you see a role for the arts to play in sort of giving an organization a sense of identity, whether that's a school like GGU or like Salesforce or Wells Fargo that you mentioned earlier?
That's really interesting. Well, I feel like you can use the creative tools of the arts to develop community or address issues of concern. That's really interesting. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, sorry to spring that on you. It's a really good question.
Well, to me, it comes down to storytelling. So narratives, right? So being able to articulate, to be able to be given the tools to be able to articulate your story, your narrative, and to be able to have the forums to share that. And for some people that's verbal, and others visual, and others could be kinesthetic or digital. And there's all different ways to create storytelling and provide voice. So to me, integrating the arts into that conversation, or that evolution of self and organization would be really exciting. It would be an exciting consultancy. I would hope that there's money in it, that organizations would be willing to pay for that. But.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely seems like it would strengthen and promote that sense of culture. I know at GGU we found, as we've been talking about the series about the arts and business and the arts, a lot of our staff and faculty are themselves working artists, and the producer of the show is an artist as well as working with us. And so it seems like there's a lot of opportunity for that creativity, I guess, to be harnessed is probably not the right word, but to sort of brought into the to the whole question of how do we create a sense of us,
Yeah, it's to me, it's the creative process, right? So in school, when I was growing up, they were just starting to cut things like art and even sports, right? So the creative process is tools that help you learn, think, collaborate more creatively, and not just rotely, but being able to see options and solutions. So like I teach emotional and social intelligence at work as one of my classes at GGU. And I think it engages a lot of creativity, but to feel empowered to have a voice is a whole nother story. Right? So um, it's to me, the arts, even if you're not good at the arts, like I can't draw,
Mhm.
I can't do things, but to feel like it's okay to explore and be creative and make creative errors. And I don't know, if you can bring that creativity to your business. I say to my artist clients all the time that businesses are jealous of you because you have 1,000 ideas a day, right? So you constantly come up with solutions. And I talk about the artist life cycle as well as the life cycle of an arts project, right? Artists literally have little seedlings of ideas all day long. And for artists, that's actually embarrassing sometimes. And
Hmm.
sometimes they've been shamed for it, right? So my friends and clients that are artists are like, well, people say they can't figure out what I'm up to and they can't label me. And I'm so confusing and I'm always creating. And I can't just say, here's my job title and I do this 40, 60, 80 hours a week. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like how great that you can be so creative. And, I see that as a gift as opposed to a problem, but that's
Yeah.
society. The Bay Area is okay with that, but other places not so much. Yeah.
No, I know exactly what you're thinking about. I read a book. I'm not going to remember the title, but it was focusing on how society defines ADD, attention deficit disorder, and the way you described artists is very similar to what the book was describing. These are folks who have all kinds of ideas all the time, and they're making connections to things, and others don't really understand them or don't recognize the value of that sort of constant creativity. I'm not saying that all artists are ADD. I'm just
Oh
it
no,
just seemed like an interesting parallel.
I mean, artists like have constant riffs, in my opinion. Like, see everything as an opportunity. Not every artist thinks this way, but there's opportunity. Like each, it's sort of like improv, right? It's the yes and, not
Mhm.
no but. Like, yes and, yes and, yes
Right.
and that can be overwhelming. If you're an accountant type, maybe you're like, stop. I need you to stop and fit in this box. And so that's what I help artists have, business vocabulary and able to interact with people that can support them when they are having so many ideas. And often it comes down to like trying to brand the artist, brand the person. Like, I don't know if my dad's watching this, but my dad once said to me, I was looking at your LinkedIn page and it's like all over the place. Like you've done so many different things. I just can't figure it out. And I'm like, it's the oeuvre, it's the body of my work. I'm all this, Dad. I'm I tried doing a full-time job several times and no,
Oh,
I feel completely stymied. I can't do it. I need that constant riffing. I mean, it can spin off and become too much, but I like working with creative people and I like being creative in my solutions. So
well, that's why your bio was so long, and it took me so
yeah,
long
that's
to
right.
get through it. Wait, and did that help with your dad when you said that to him? Was it like, oh yeah, I get it now?
I don't remember. I was so focused on like, oh, you're right. I don't know what's going on with me. What's wrong?
Oh man. So we just have a minute or two left. And again, I'm talking with Amy Kweskin. I should have said that several times, from Artsightful, and that's where people can find you, I suppose, if they want to reach out, because
I'm
we've
on
already
LinkedIn.
gotten.
Yeah.
Oh, and you're on LinkedIn, right? Exactly. So that's great, because I've already seen several people proposing projects with you and things like that. But here's a question I have. I always try to figure out how to connect this back to um, Golden Gate University, because that's where I am, and
I
that's
love
who's
GGU. Yeah.
sponsoring this. And so this is great. So what do you think institutions like GGU and or others could do to support the arts and the arts community? Is there something we could be doing that we're not doing now, or that we can focus on a bit more to make sure that we have a place for the arts in what we do, and that we can support that in our community?
Bring back the arts administration program. I'd love to run it. Okay. Sorry, Anne, but I'd love to run it. Okay. Bring back arts administration, first of all. Second of all, provide workshops. I mean, not workshops, but even courses, maybe you do already, in governance of nonprofits. Nonprofit management would be very helpful. Grant writing courses would be helpful. Not that we're trying to create non-expert experts, but it would be very helpful if you are on a board to understand, or even run an organization, or part of an institution, what it means to create a grant program or to apply for those grants. I think if the school could offer some direct service to nonprofits and arts organizations, like business planning, legal aspects, would be great if we had clinics or something that we could offer at GGU. GGU I had a piano series. It was really, when I was a graduate student, I started a piano series where we brought in artists that would play the piano during breaks between courses.
Wow.
In the hallways. And we also had, I think there's still art on the walls, but we had arts on the walls. And many of your faculty, I see my mom there. Many of the faculty, so Walt Stevens was on the board of, Stevenson was on the board of Theater Bay Area. So having, being board members and providing services to arts nonprofits is really tremendous as well. And Ann Smith was on the board of Theater Bay Area. So all these ways of like integrating and partnering and leading, but also educating. It's just, it's such an opportunity to have arts administration. It would make such a difference in the Bay Area to have that program again.
Yeah, and somebody just noted in the question here, but I'm just going to present it as an answer because I think it is. He said, shouldn't our big successful companies in San Francisco be willing to support an artist environment that improves where their employees live? And I think there's a role for us to play as educators too, right? To do that.
I'm so into it, right? So it would be amazing. So Business Arts Council, we used to partner arts and business, and that's gone as well. So I would love to create an arts and business connection. Right. So Wells Fargo was a big underwriter of that Hearts in San Francisco project, and that project was underwritten by many corporations. So it brought arts and tourism was the idea. So absolutely. Yes, those partnerships would be great.
That's great. All right. So I've got some homework to do after this, then, is what I'm hearing you say.
I'll help you
get that going. Thanks. Well, so again, it's been great to talk with you, Amy. This is Amy Kweskin from Artsightful. You can find her on LinkedIn. She's also doing, oh, and wait, did we promote, we mentioned your book? Yes.
So this book is the Center for Cultural Innovation, which has published the 3rd edition of this book, Business of Art. And I've written a couple of chapters in it. It uses the business model canvas. And it's actually, it was first published by my colleague, Nancy Hightone-Leb, who I mentioned earlier, who graduated from the Arts Administration program at Golden Gate University. This is a great book, and it's hot off the press, and it's a workbook. So that's available through cciarts.org. And also, I think you can get on Amazon, but I feel like it's on sale right now through CCI Arts.
Yeah, and Joyce, our producer, just put the link in the chat here if folks are interested. So by all means, if you enjoyed what you heard here today, this will be posted on YouTube, and you can find it on the GGU YouTube channel. Unless you're already watching this on YouTube, in which case that already happened, it's too late. But anyway, Amy, thanks again. I really appreciate this. And it's so interesting to know what you're doing. And it's just such a great piece of, I'm not gonna give GGU all of the credit for it, but it's so great to have you be part of the.
It's very much GGU. And I just feel so loved because in the chat, I'm seeing my Doctor of Business Administration classmates are here. So it makes me feel like, see, we're all supportive of each other, regardless of our areas of expertise or interest. So
yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Oh, the heart thing. There it is again. All right. Well, thanks to all of you for coming, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode of Back to the Basics on GGU Presents. So thanks very much. Oh yeah, now there's some creative hearts going on there. All right. Take care and we'll see you soon. All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.